Okay, we are going to be working on lesson 8.8, which is factoring by grouping. Okay, so there are going to be 4 steps here, and when we say factor by grouping, we're talking about something with 4 parts. Okay, so if you kind of look down here, right here, it has to have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. Remember, that's called just a polynomial. Okay, and so there's going to be 4 steps that we're going to do. Okay, so the first one is we're going to pull a GCF from all parts. All parts, okay? So if we come down here, and let's go ahead and look at this guy right here. So when I'm saying pull GCF from all parts, I need to look at all these parts. Is there something that will come out of all 4? Well, in this particular case, no, there is not, okay? So then I go to step 2. Step 2 says group, all right? So we're going to group. So this is what I'm talking about when I say group. We are going to break this up into 2 smaller parts. So we're going to put a parentheses set here for our first group and a parentheses set back here for our second group. Okay. Now the third step says pull GCF from each grouping. Okay, so we're going to look for a GCF just out of these 2 and a GCF out of these 2. So we're going to pull a GCF from each grouping. And what's going to be really important here is our insides must match. And I'll talk about what that means here in a second. And then our last step will be to rewrite, okay, for a final answer. All right, so if I come down here, we're on step 2, we grouped. So now we're going to step 3, and we're going to pull a GCF from each grouping. So if I look at this first part right here, I can pull out a 2, and then x squared next, I can pull out an x. So I'm going to pull out a 2x, and so when I divide by 2x, I have a 2x left here, and then 14 divided by 2 is 7, and the x got pulled out. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to pull out a GCF. So 6 and 21 have a 3 in common. So I'm going to pull a 3 out or divide both sections by 3 and get 2x plus 7. Okay, so now I just also talked about up above that your insides must match. And here's what I'm talking about. Inside your parentheses set, those should be the same. If they are not the same, then you have messed up. Okay, so now last step, we're going to rewrite. And when we rewrite, we're going to put together the outsides and then just write down the inside or the blue part there that I've highlighted. All right, so our answer here, put together the outside, so 2x plus 3, and then rewrite the inside, 2x plus 7. Okay, now you need to understand that everything we're doing here is we are reverse foiling. So if I think about this and I take this back and do x times x, I would get 4x squared plus 14x plus 6x plus 21. So now if I look here at this original and then look here, those should match up, okay? But your answer right here is this guy. This is what we're looking for a final answer, okay? But just note that if we FOIL, okay, we should get back to the original. So factoring is just backwards FOIL or reverse FOIL, okay? All right, let's try another one. Okay, so on this guy, again, look for GCF between all 4 parts. Well, 2s and 7s aren't going to have anything in common, and we don't have variables in all of them. So our second step will be to group. Okay, now keep that negative with that 2. Okay, so anytime you've got a negative, make sure it stays with the number. All right, so in this first grouping here, I can pull out an x, and I would have 2y plus 7 left. Okay, now to get the insides to match, because remember I said the insides have to match here. If I look up here, signs are going to be a problem. I have a -2 and a -7, but down here I have positives, okay? So to fix that, when negatives are an issue, I'm going to pull out a -1. And so that'll flip my signs over to a positive 2y and a plus 7. Now my insides match, my insides match, which is what I'm looking for, okay? And then again, we're going to rewrite the outside, putting those 2 terms together. So my answer here will be x minus 1 and then 2y plus 7. Okay? And again, if I took the time to FOIL all this out, I should get the answer right back up to here. All right, next one. Okay, so I'm looking for a GCF. amongst all 4 parts. Well, 3 and 4 don't have anything in common. They don't all have variables. So we're going to go ahead and go to our second step, which is group. All right, so in this first grouping here, 15 and 3 would have a 3 in common. They both have an A, so I'm going to pull out a 3A. So then 5, the A got pulled out, minus, if you want to put a 1 there, you can, you don't have to. Pull out the A and you're left with a B. Okay, so now I look at this guy, the second guy here, and if I'm looking at 4 and 20, I can pull out a 4 and get B minus 5. So now I'm looking to the inside. So when I look at the inside, we've got a problem. All right, if I look at this guy, this is a positive 5, but right here is a negative 5. This is a negative B or negative 1B. This is a positive. So they're almost exactly the same, but my signs aren't right. Okay, so when that happens, what we're going to do, instead of pulling a positive 4, we're going to pull a negative 4. And so when we pull that negative, it's going to flip my signs, and now my insides will match. So now these are matching. They're not wrote in the same order, but they are matching. I have a positive 5, a positive 5. I have a negative 1B or a negative B. Okay, so now we rewrite outsides together. So I have a 3A and a minus 4 now instead of a plus 4. Okay, now on the second guy here, it doesn't matter which one of these you write. They're the same thing, okay? So you can write this guy or this guy. They're the same. So I usually put my variable out front, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, and that would be my answer. Okay, all right, let's go to the next one here. Okay, again, I'm looking for a GCF amongst all parts. There isn't one. So I'm going to go ahead and group. Okay, so on my first grouping here, I can pull out a P. So I'll have a 3 minus 2P left over. Out of the second part here, I can pull a 9. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out a 9. And so I end up with a negative 2P and a positive 3 when I divide those both by 9. Okay, so now I'm looking to the inside, making sure that these match up. And so here I have a positive 3 and a positive 3. I have a negative 2P and a negative 2P, so they do match. Okay, so I'm going to have P plus 9. Again, put together those outsides, right? Put that P and plus 9 together. And then the inside, it doesn't matter which one you write, negative 2P plus 3. And that's going to be my answer. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and flip over. Okay, so now again, first step is GCF. Now, if I look at this, these are all evens, so I know at least a 2 is going to come out. And in this case, if I do a little more thinking, actually a 4 would come out. So all of these are divisible by 4. The other thing I need to look at is notice how I have a Q in all of them. So first step is to actually pull a 4Q out. This is the first time we've seen a GCF in all 4 parts. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a squared off bracket just because I think it's easier to see. So now if I pull out a 4 and a Q, I have 3 Q's left here. 8 divided by 4 is 2. There would be 2 Q's left over. 12 divided by 4 is 3 with 1 Q left over. And then negative 24 divided by 4 is negative 6. The Q got pulled out. Okay, so that's what that looks like when you're pulling a GCF out of all 4 parts. Now our next step, now we still go to group. Okay, we're just grouping what's inside the brackets here. We don't worry about this 4Q for right now. Okay, so now I'm looking at this guy and figuring out what GCF can I pull here. Well, I would pull a Q squared, and that would give me a Q minus 2 left over. On the second guy here, I'm going to pull out a 3 and get Q minus 2. All right, so now I look, does my insides match? Yes, they do. So since my insides match, I'm going to go ahead and write down Q squared plus 3, right? Okay, because all I'm doing is putting together my outsides here, Q squared and the 3. And then the insides match, so I'm going to go ahead and write that down, Q minus 2. And then when you pull out a GCF, that has to show up here at the end, okay? So I have a 4Q, a Q squared plus 3, and a Q minus 2. Now, if it is helpful, you can go ahead and keep the squared off bracket here and go ahead and drop that 4Q right here if you're afraid that you're going to forget to put it down here in your final answer. So you can keep the 4 all the way through, or you can just take note that it needs to show up at the end. All right, let's try one more here. Okay, so again, I'm looking for a GCF. There is a GCF here. They all have H's in common, so we know we can pull an H out. And in this case, after a little thought, you probably also figure out that you can pull out a 3. So I'm going to pull out a 3 and an H. So I've got 2h to the third plus 3h squared plus 4h plus 6. Okay, so I just divided everything by 3h. Okay, now group. All right, so in this first grouping here, all I can pull is an h squared out. So I'll have a 2h and a 3 left over. In the second grouping here, I can pull a 2 out. So I have a 2h plus 3. So now rewrite, okay, as long as your insides match, which these do, go ahead and rewrite it. Put together the outsides and rewrite the inside. So I have h squared plus 2, 2h plus 3. And then again, make sure that that 3h drops in. Okay, and just like last time, if you prefer, keep the bracket there and put 3h out in front of it if it helps you remember to bring it down. Okay, all right, that concludes our notes for lesson 8-8.